St. Catherine's Hospital was quiet at 2 a.m., the kind of quiet that felt heavy, punctuated only by the distant beep of monitors and the soft squeak of wheels on linoleum. The cardiology wing on the fourth floor was dimly lit, most patients asleep, most visitors gone home hours ago. In a private suite at the end of the hall, Richard Hayes sat upright in bed, reading quarterly reports on his tablet. 62 years old, billionaire CEO of Hayes Manufacturing, an empire his grandfather had built, his father had expanded, and Richard had transformed into an $8 billion global operation. He wore expensive silk pajamas. A Patek Philippe watch sat on the bedside table, $470,000, a gift to himself last year. His reading glasses were Italian. Everything about him spoke of wealth, power, control. Everything except the IV in his arm and the heart monitor beeping steadily beside him. Routine cardiac tests, his doctor had said. Nothing serious, just precautionary given his age and family history. Overnight observation. He'd be released in the morning. Richard had turned it into a working session. He'd made 3 conference calls already, reviewed 2 acquisition proposals, sent 14 emails. The hospital might as well have been his office. He was alone, had been, for 10 years, since his wife Catherine died. Cancer. Brutal. Fast. They'd had no children. Catherine couldn't. They'd discussed adoption, but never followed through. Always too busy. Always next year, until suddenly there was no next year. Now Richard had money, power, legacy, and absolutely nobody to leave it to except distant nephews he barely knew. Vultures, mostly, calling twice a year, Christmas and his birthday. Transparent, predictable, waiting. He pushed the thought away, focused on the quarterly numbers. Revenue up 7%, margins holding, stock price climbing. These were things he understood, measurable, controllable, real. Down the hall, in the public waiting area, David Santos pushed an industrial cleaning cart, 38 years old, night shift janitor. He wore white work pants, a white button-down shirt, and a yellow maintenance vest with St. Catherine's Environmental Services embroidered on the back. His shift started at 11 p.m., ended at 7 a.m. 8 hours of mopping floors, emptying trash, sanitizing surfaces. Invisible work, necessary but unseen, the kind of job people looked through rather than at. David didn't mind. The pay was steady. The hours let him be home when his son got off the school bus, and after 4 years of single parenting, steady and present mattered more than prestigious or impressive. His son Caleb sat in the corner of the waiting area, doing homework, 8 years old, quiet, focused, wearing a red jacket and pink noise-reducing earplugs, sensory tools that helped him manage the unpredictable sounds of a hospital. Caleb had autism spectrum disorder, mild, high-functioning, but the world was still loud and confusing and overwhelming sometimes. The earplugs helped, so did routines and numbers and his father being nearby. "You okay, buddy?" David asked, pausing his mopping. Caleb looked up, nodded, held up his math worksheet. "I finished multiplication. Can I do the word problems now?" "Absolutely. Let me know if you need help." "Okay, Daddy." David returned to his work, mopping, methodical, the same pattern every night, efficient, thorough, professional. What the hospital didn't know, what nobody knew anymore, was that David had once been someone very different. He'd been an aerospace engineer, MIT graduate, worked at NASA, satellite systems, orbital mechanics, the stars. He'd been good at it, brilliant even, on track for a senior position, maybe director someday. But his wife Maria had died 4 years ago, childbirth complications. Caleb had been born premature, special needs. The medical bills had been crushing despite David's good salary. Not enough, never enough. And Maria had died because they'd been at a county hospital, the only one their insurance fully covered. Not the best equipment, not the best specialists, just good enough. And good enough hadn't saved her. David had quit NASA 6 months later, not because he couldn't handle the work, because Caleb needed him, full-time, present, there. Autism diagnosis, therapy, schools, IEPs, 1,000 appointments and challenges, and moments where his son needed an advocate, a father who showed up, not a father chasing stars while his child struggled alone. So David had walked away from satellites and prestige and everything he'd worked for, became a janitor, night shift, flexible, there for Caleb's mornings and afternoons, sleeping while Caleb was at school. He didn't regret it, not once. He'd reached for the stars and lost what mattered. Now he reached for his son, and that was enough. Down the hall, an elderly woman in a wheelchair rolled slowly past Richard's open door. She looked confused, lost. Her hospital gown was crooked. No nurse attended her. Richard glanced up from his tablet, looked at her, looked away. Not his problem. The woman rolled further, stopped, looked around uncertainly. Caleb, in the waiting area, saw her, removed one earplug, watched. The woman tried to turn her wheelchair around, struggled, couldn't quite manage it. Caleb stood, walked over quietly, gently took the wheelchair handles. "Hi," he said softly. "Are you lost?" The woman looked up, frightened at first. Then she saw his face, a child, kind eyes. I can't find my room. 412, I think, or 421? "I'll help you find it," Caleb said. "What's your name?" "Margaret." "Hi, Margaret. I'm Caleb. Don't worry, we'll find your room." He wheeled her carefully down the hall, checking door numbers, patient, gentle, no hurry. David saw, stopped mopping, smiled, proud. Richard, in his room, also saw, watched through his door. This small boy, janitor's son, helping an elderly stranger. No nurse had noticed, no doctor, just this child, acting without being asked. Interesting, Richard thought, though probably performative. Kids showing off, trying to impress someone. Everyone had an angle. Richard had learned that long ago. Caleb found Margaret's room, 418. He wheeled her to the doorway. "Here you go. Do you need help getting back to bed?" "No, dear. My nurse will help. Thank you. You're very sweet." "You're welcome. Be careful, okay?" Caleb returned to his homework corner, sat down, put his earplug back in, resumed his word problems, as if nothing had happened. David approached. "That was really kind, bud. I'm proud of you." Caleb looked up. She was lost and scared. Nobody was helping her. "I know. You did good." Richard watched this exchange through his doorway. Father praising son. Simple, genuine, no fanfare, just goodness. He felt something uncomfortable. Curiosity? Skepticism? He wasn't sure. An idea formed. A test. Richard pulled his wallet from his bedside drawer. Expensive leather, full of cash. He'd withdrawn $800 yesterday for a business lunch that got canceled. Credit cards, ID, everything. He stood carefully, mindful of the IV pole attached to his arm. Walked to his doorway, glanced down the hall. David was mopping near the nurse's station. Caleb was alone in the waiting area. Richard walked casually to the water fountain, set his wallet on the ledge, pretended to drink, then walked back to his room, leaving the wallet behind. He watched from his doorway. 5 minutes passed. A nurse walked by. Didn't notice the wallet. 7 minutes. A doctor. Also didn't see it. 10 minutes. Caleb stood, stretched, walked toward the vending machines, saw the wallet. Stopped. Richard leaned forward, watching. Caleb picked up the wallet, opened it, looked at the cash. 8 $100 bills. More money than Caleb had probably ever seen in one place. Richard's jaw tightened. Here it comes. The grab. the pocket, the human nature he'd seen 1,000 times. People were fundamentally selfish. This would prove it. Even children. Caleb closed the wallet, looked at the ID card visible in the clear window, read the name, looked around. Then he walked, slowly, carefully, holding the wallet with both hands like something precious, down the hall, checking room numbers, 401, 403, 405. He reached 412, Richard's room, knocked softly on the doorframe. "Excuse me? Sir?" Richard turned, feigning surprise. "Yes?" Caleb held out the wallet. "This is yours. I found it by the water fountain. You forgot it." Richard took it, opened it. Everything there. Cash, cards, everything. He looked at this small boy with pink earplugs and earnest eyes. "You didn't take anything." "It's not mine," Caleb said simply. "It's yours." "But there's a lot of money here. You could have." "Could have doesn't mean should have," Caleb said. His voice was matter-of-fact, reciting something learned. "Daddy says taking something that's not yours is wrong, even if you need it. That's called character." Richard stared. "Your father taught you that?" "Yes. Character means doing the right thing even when nobody's watching, even when it's hard." Caleb smiled slightly. "I should go back to my homework. I'm glad I found your wallet, mister." He walked away, back to his corner, sat down, picked up his pencil, as if returning $800 was completely normal. Richard stood in his doorway, wallet in hand, feeling something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Shame. David approached Richard's room minutes later, apologetic, embarrassed. "Sir, I'm so sorry. My son, Caleb, he shouldn't have bothered you. He gets curious sometimes, and—" "He returned my wallet," Richard interrupted. "I left it by the fountain. He brought it back. Nothing missing?" David relaxed. "Oh, good. I'm glad. He's a good kid, honest. Most people wouldn't have returned it, especially not with cash inside." "Well, we're not most people," David said with quiet pride. "We do what's right. Money doesn't change that." Richard studied this man. Janitor's uniform, worn shoes, wedding ring still on his finger, though Richard noticed he was alone. Widower, probably. "Your son has autism," Richard observed. Not a question. He'd noticed the earplugs, the careful movements, the way the boy had spoken. Literal, precise. "He does. Mild. He's amazing, though. Smart. Kind. Just needs the world to be a little quieter sometimes." "And you bring him to work?" "Sometimes, when I can't get a sitter, or when he wants to be near me. Is that a problem?" "He doesn't disturb anyone. He does homework, and—" "It's not a problem," Richard said. "Just unusual. Most parents would leave their kid home, alone, rather than bring them to work." "I'm not most parents," David said simply. "Caleb comes first, always." He nodded respectfully. "I should get back to work. Glad you got your wallet back, sir." David left, returned to his cart, continued mopping. Richard returned to his bed, but he couldn't focus on his reports anymore, couldn't stop thinking about the boy, the father, the wallet test that had somehow backfired. He'd expected theft, or at least hesitation, temptation, the natural human impulse to take when nobody's watching. Instead, he'd witnessed integrity, from an 8-year-old, from a family that clearly had very little. He watched them through his doorway over the next hour, watched David help a nurse lift a heavy equipment cart even though it wasn't his job, off-duty kindness, unpaid assistance. Watched Caleb share his granola bar with another child in the waiting area who was crying because she was hungry and the cafeteria was closed. Watched David pay for a stranger's coffee at the vending machine after the man's dollar got rejected and he patted his pockets saying he was out of cash. Small things, quiet things, things nobody made a big deal about, but they added up to a pattern, to a way of being in the world that Richard had forgotten existed, or maybe had never known. His nephews called while he was watching. James, the older one, 38, entitled, lazy. "Hey, Uncle Richard, just checking in, making sure you're okay. We heard about the hospital stay." "How did you hear?" Richard asked dryly. He hadn't told them. "Oh, you know, news travels. Are you all right?" Do you need anything? I'm fine. Routine tests. Good, good. Well, you take care of yourself, okay? You're not getting any younger. Ha ha. The subtext was clear. Don't die yet, but when you do, remember us. Richard ended the call, disgusted. Looked back at David and Caleb, poor, struggling, giving freely what they had, and looked at his own family, rich, comfortable, circling like vultures. The contrast was sickening. Around 4 a.m., Richard's lawyer arrived. Gerald Park, excellent attorney, discreet. Richard had called him earlier, said he wanted to review estate planning documents. At 4 a.m., Gerald had said. I pay you enough to come at 4 a.m., Richard replied. So Gerald came, carrying a briefcase, files, everything needed to update Richard's will. They sat in the hospital room, door open, voices low but audible in the quiet hallway. So you want to revise the trust structure, Gerald asked. I want to revise everything, Richard said. The will, the foundation, all of it. Okay, what changes are you thinking? Before Richard could answer, voices drifted from the hallway, loud, inappropriate for a hospital at 4 a.m. Richard's nephews, both of them, James and Thomas, arguing. I'm telling you, once he dies, we split it 50-50. But I'm the older one. I should get more. I'm technically the senior heir. That's not how it works, James. The will says equal distribution. Well, maybe we can contest that, get it changed. You can't change a will before someone dies, idiot. But after, if we don't like the terms, then we contest, get it overturned, claim undue influence, or whatever lawyers say. Richard's hands clenched. Gerald looked uncomfortable. Should I? Gerald started. No, Richard said quietly. Let them talk. I want to hear this. When do you think he'll actually die? Thomas asked. He's 62. Could be another 20 years. God, I hope not. I need the money now. Do you know how much debt I'm in? That's your own fault. Gambling problem. Shut up. At least I'm not spending everything on that ridiculous boat. The boat is an investment in looking like an a-hole. They laughed, crass, callous, standing in a hospital hallway discussing their uncle's death like a business transaction. Richard stood, walked to his doorway. They saw him, froze. Uncle Richard, we were just... I heard exactly what you were, Richard said coldly. Leave now and don't call me again, either of you, ever. But, Uncle, now. They left, quickly, shamefully. Richard returned to his bed, sat heavily. Gerald said nothing, waited. They're all I have, Richard said quietly, my only family, and they're counting the days until I'm dead so they can fight over the money. Not uncommon, Gerald said carefully. Inherited wealth often... I don't want to hear about statistics, Richard snapped. Then softer, I need you to draft a new will, completely new. Remove them, both of them, everything. Everything? Everything. They get nothing, zero. Let them know what it's like to actually work for something. Gerald made notes. And the estate, $8 billion plus assets, where do you want it to go? Richard didn't answer immediately. He was watching through his door again. David, mopping near the vending machines. Caleb, asleep now in the waiting area chair, jacket pulled up as a blanket. Father glancing over every few minutes to check on his son. Protective, present. A crazy idea formed, probably stupid, definitely impulsive. But Richard was 62, cardiac tests, mortality staring him in the face, and he'd just heard his only relatives discuss his death like a windfall. I need to talk to someone first before we finalize anything. Who? The janitor. The janitor? You heard me. Richard walked down the hall, IV pole in tow. Found David organizing his cleaning supplies. Mr. Santos? David looked up, surprised. Yes, sir? Is something wrong? No, Can I ask you something? It's personal. David glanced at Caleb, still asleep, safe. Okay. Why do you help people? You work night shift, raising a son alone. You have nothing. He stopped. Sorry, that came out wrong. I mean, you clearly don't have much, financially, And yet I've watched you. You help everyone. Nurses, patients, strangers. Your son does the same. Why? David was quiet for a moment. Because we can, because it costs nothing to be kind, and because my wife taught us that. Your wife? Maria. She died 4 years ago. Childbirth. Caleb's birth, actually. Complications, premature delivery. We were at a county hospital. Our insurance, not the best facility, not the best equipment. She didn't make it. I'm sorry, Richard said, and meant it. Thank you. It's hard, still. But Maria, she was the kindest person I ever knew. She volunteered at soup kitchens, helped neighbors, always said wealth wasn't money. Wealth was how much you gave, how much you loved, how much you mattered to others. David smiled sadly. I was an engineer before. Aerospace, NASA, good salary, decent life. But after she died, I realized I'd been chasing the wrong things. Prestige, career. I was gone 80 hours a week. And when Maria needed me most, I was at work, plating satellite systems, reaching for stars. And I couldn't reach her. So you quit? I quit. Caleb has autism. He needed me, full-time, present. No more 80-hour weeks. No more choosing career over family. So I became a janitor. Night shift. I'm home when he needs me. I'm there. That's wealth. That's success. Being there. Richard was silent, processing. You said you were at NASA. You gave that up to mop floors? I gave up satellites to raise my son, he corrected gently. That's not a sacrifice. That's a privilege. What good is reaching space if you can't reach your own son? The words hit Richard like a physical blow. You asked me why we help people, David continued. It's because my wife taught us that's what matters. You can have all the money in the world. You can have success and power and prestige. But if nobody would miss you, really miss you, not miss your money, then what do you actually have? David looked at Richard directly. You have billions, sir. I know who you are. Richard Hayes, manufacturing empire. I've read about you. But can I ask you something personal? Go ahead. Who do you have? If you died tomorrow, who would grieve? Not for your money, for you, for the person, for the loss of your presence in their life. Richard opened his mouth, closed it, had no answer. David nodded gently. I don't mean to be rude, sir, but I have Caleb and Maria's memory, and I know that when I die, my son will cry because he lost his father, not because he lost an inheritance. That's the only wealth that actually matters, being loved for who you are, not what you have. He picked up his mop. I should finish my rounds. Glad we could talk. David walked away, leaving Richard standing in the hallway, empty-handed, empty-hearted. Who would miss him? His nephews? No, they'd celebrate. His employees? Maybe, for a day, then they'd move on. His friends? He had none, not real ones, just business acquaintances. Richard walked back to his room. Gerald was still there, waiting. Did you talk to the janitor? I did. And I know what I want to do with my estate now. Richard walked down the hall, IV pole in tow, found David organizing his cleaning supplies. Mr. Santos? David looked up, surprised. Yes, sir? Is something wrong? No, Can I ask you something? It's personal. David glanced at Caleb. Still asleep, safe. Okay. Why do you help people? You work night shift, raising a son alone. You have nothing... He stopped. Sorry, that came out wrong. I mean, you clearly don't have much, financially. And yet I've watched you. You help everyone. Nurses, patients, strangers. Your son does the same. Why? David was quiet for a moment. Because we can. Because it costs nothing to be kind. And because my wife taught us that. Your wife? Maria. She died 4 years ago. Childbirth. Caleb's birth, actually. Complications. Premature delivery. We were at a county hospital. Our insurance, not the best facility, not the best equipment. She didn't make it. I'm sorry, Richard said, and meant it. Thank you. It's hard, still. But Maria, she was the kindest person I ever knew. She volunteered at soup kitchens, helped neighbors, always said wealth wasn't money. Wealth was how much you gave, how much you loved, how much you mattered to others. David smiled sadly. I was an engineer before, aerospace, NASA, good salary, decent life. But after she died, I realized I'd been chasing the wrong things. Prestige, career. I was gone 80 hours a week, and when Maria needed me most, I was at work, plating satellite systems, reaching for stars, and I couldn't reach her. So you quit? I quit. Caleb has autism. He needed me, full-time, present. No more 80-hour weeks, no more choosing career over family. So I became a janitor. Night shift. I'm home when he needs me. I'm there. That's wealth. That's success. Being there. Richard was silent, processing. You said you were at NASA. You gave that up to mop floors? I gave up satellites to raise my son, David corrected gently. That's not a sacrifice. That's a privilege. What good is reaching space if you can't reach your own son? The words hit Richard like a physical blow. You asked me why we help people. It's because my wife taught us that's what matters. You can have all the money in the world. You can have success and power and prestige. But if nobody would miss you, really miss you, not miss your money, then what do you actually have? David looked at Richard directly. You have billions, sir. I know who you are. Richard Hayes, manufacturing empire. I've read about you. But can I ask you something personal? Go ahead. Who do you have? If you died tomorrow, who would grieve? Not for your money, for you, for the person, for the loss of your presence in their life. Richard opened his mouth, closed it, had no answer. David nodded gently. I don't mean to be rude, sir, but I have Caleb and Maria's memory, and I know that when I die, my son will cry because he lost his father, not because he lost an inheritance. That's the only wealth that actually matters. Being loved for who you are, not what you have. He picked up his mop. I should finish my rounds. Glad we could talk. David walked away, leaving Richard standing in the hallway, empty-handed, empty-hearted. Who would miss him? His nephews? No, they'd celebrate. His employees? Maybe, for a day, then they'd move on. His friends? He had none, not real ones, just business acquaintances. Richard walked back to his room. Gerald was still there, waiting. Did you talk to the janitor? I did. And I know what I want to do with my estate now. Over the next week, Richard had Gerald draw up completely new documents. His will was rewritten entirely. James and Thomas removed. 0 inheritance, just a letter. You waited for my death like a business opportunity. You get nothing. Earn your own fortune, or learn what character actually means. His estate restructured. The bulk of his wealth, $6 billion, would fund a new foundation, the Character Foundation. Mission: to provide scholarships and support to working-class families who demonstrated integrity, kindness, and character despite financial hardship. Students who helped others without expectation of reward. Parents who sacrificed careers to be present for their children. People like David, like Caleb, like Maria. The foundation would be managed by a board, and Richard wanted David Santos to serve as director. He called David to the hospital. Formal meeting, private. Mr. Santos, I want to offer you a position. David looked confused. Sir, I'm a janitor. I don't think... I know exactly who you are, Richard interrupted. You're an engineer, MIT, NASA. You gave up a prestigious career to be present for your son. That's not failure. That's leadership, the exact kind of leadership I need. I don't understand. Richard explained the foundation, the mission, the $6 billion endowment. I want you to run it. Director, full salary, benefits, enough to be comfortable, enough to give Caleb the care he needs, the education, the future. David stared. Sir, I can't. This is... Why me? Because you understand what I spent 62 years forgetting. That wealth isn't money, it's character, it's presence, it's being someone who would be missed for who they are, not what they have. You live that. I want you to teach it. I'm not a teacher. You're a father who returned to Earth to raise his son. You're exactly who should be running this. David was silent for a long time. What about Caleb? Full college scholarship, when he's ready. If he wants to study aerospace engineering like his father, the foundation will fund it, entirely, as a tribute to your wife. Maria deserves that legacy. David's eyes filled with tears. She would have loved that. Then say yes. I need to think. Can I talk to Caleb, make sure this is right for him? Of course, take your time. But David, I'm dying. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but eventually. And when I die, I want to know I left something good behind, something that actually matters. You can help me do that. David nodded slowly. Okay, yes, I'll do it. For Maria, and for Caleb, and for you, sir, because you deserve to leave something better than vultures circling. They shook hands. Partners, not employer and employee, partners. There's one more thing, Richard said. The hospital, St. Catherine's. It's where your wife died, where she should have been saved but wasn't because they didn't have the right resources. Yes, David said quietly. I want to fund a new maternal care wing, state-of-the-art, best equipment, best specialists, so no other family loses someone because of inadequate care. We'll name it after Maria, the Santos Memorial Maternal Care Wing. David broke, completely, sat down, covered his face, sobbed. Richard let him. Didn't speak, didn't try to fix it, just waited. When David could breathe again, he looked up. She died because we couldn't afford better. She died because I chose career over her. If I'd been there more, if I'd pushed harder for better insurance. She died because the system failed her, not because you failed. But we can honor her. We can make sure other wives, other mothers don't die the same way. That's her legacy. Character, kindness, care. David nodded. She would want that, more than anything. She'd want other babies to live, other mothers to survive. Then we'll build it, together. Your engineering expertise, my funding, her memory guiding us. Thank you, David whispered. Thank you for seeing us, for seeing her. You taught me to see. You and your son. You taught me what wealth actually is. 6 months later, St. Catherine's Hospital hosted a ceremony. The grand opening of the Santos Memorial Maternal Care Wing. Richard stood at the podium, healthier now, cardiac issues managed, but still aware of mortality, still grateful for borrowed time. This wing represents something my late wife Catherine would have loved, a second chance, for mothers, for babies, for families who deserve the best care, regardless of what they can afford. He gestured to the plaque on the wall. Bronze, beautiful, engraved Santos Memorial Maternal Care Wing, in memory of Maria Santos, whose love taught us character matters, funded by the Character Foundation. He gestured to the plaque on the wall. Bronze, beautiful, engraved Santos Memorial Maternal Care Wing, in memory of Maria Santos, whose love taught us character matters, funded by the Character Foundation. Maria Santos died here 4 years ago, Richard continued. Not because doctors didn't try, but because resources were limited, insurance was limited, options were limited. This wing changes that. State-of-the-art equipment, top specialists, and it's free, entirely funded for anyone who needs it. The crowd applauded. Doctors, nurses, community members, grateful families. And I want to introduce the man who made this possible. Not me. I just provided money. He provided the vision, the heart, the character. David Santos, director of the Character Foundation, and Maria's husband. David stepped forward, nervous, unused to attention, but present for Maria. "Thank you, Richard, and thank you all for being here. Maria was the kindest person I ever knew. She gave everything to everyone, and when she died, I thought that kindness died with her. But my son Caleb reminded me, kindness doesn't die, it multiplies, if we choose to pass it on." He gestured to Caleb, sitting in the front row, wearing a suit, pink earplugs in, proud. "Caleb, can you come up here?" Caleb walked to the podium. David handed him a microphone. "Hi, I'm Caleb. I'm 8. My mama died when I was born. I never met her, but my daddy tells me stories. He says she was kind. She helped people. She loved everyone, even strangers." His voice wavered. David put a hand on his shoulder. Support. "I wish I could have met her, but Daddy says she's still here, in me. When I help people, when I'm kind, that's her, living through me. So I try to be kind, like she was. And now this hospital wing will help other mamas, other babies, so they don't die like she did." Caleb looked at Richard. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes, for seeing us, for helping us, for making Mama's kindness bigger." The room was silent. Then someone started clapping. Then everyone. Standing ovation for an 8-year-old who'd lost his mother and chosen kindness anyway. Richard stood, applauded, tears running down his face openly, unashamed. After the ceremony, Richard, David, and Caleb stood in the new wing, empty, pristine, ready to save lives. "Your wife would be proud," Richard said. "She would be," David agreed. "Of all of this. Of you too, Richard. You changed. You chose differently. You taught me how." They stood in comfortable silence. 3 people. Unlikely family. Chosen family. "Can I ask you something?" Richard said. "That night in the hospital, when you returned my wallet, when you helped the nurse, when Caleb wheeled the elderly woman back to her room, did you know I was watching?" "No," David said. "Why?" "Because I dropped that wallet on purpose. I was testing you, testing your son. I was so cynical, so convinced everyone had an angle. I wanted to prove humans were fundamentally selfish." David smiled. "And?" "And you proved me wrong, completely wrong. You weren't performing, you were just being. Being kind because that's who you are, not because someone was watching. Character means doing the right thing even when nobody's watching," Caleb repeated his father's lesson. "Even when it's hard." "Even when it's hard," Richard echoed. "Better late than never." Finally, at 62. "Better late than never," David agreed. 3 years later, Richard's health declined. Not dramatically, just age, time, the inevitable. He was in hospice care, comfortable, pain-managed, peaceful. David and Caleb visited every day. Sometimes they read to him. Sometimes they just sat, present. "You know what's funny?" Richard said one afternoon. His voice was weak but clear. "What?" David asked. "I spent 40 years building an empire, billions of dollars, thousands of employees, global reach. And none of that matters now. What matters is this, you two, being here. That's the wealth I'll take with me." "You're not dying yet," Caleb said firmly. "The nurses said you have time." "Maybe, but even if I have years, this is what I'll remember. Not the acquisitions, not the quarterly reports. This, friendship, chosen family, presence." David squeezed his hand. "We're here. We're not going anywhere." "I know. That's the difference, isn't it? My nephews never came, not once, too busy hoping I'd die faster. But you came every day, even though you don't benefit from my death, even though you already have the foundation funding. You came because you care, about me, the person." "Of course we do," David said. "Your family." "Chosen family," Richard corrected with a small smile. "The best kind." He looked at Caleb, 11 now, taller, confident, thriving. "Caleb, I have something for you." Caleb leaned closer. "What, Mr. Hayes?" "A letter, in the drawer there, for when I'm gone. It's about your mother, about what she taught me, about how her kindness saved me from dying bitter and alone." Caleb retrieved the letter, held it carefully. "Read it when I'm gone, okay? But know this now. You changed my life, both of you. You taught me what my own wife tried to teach me years ago, that love isn't about what you have, it's about who you have and whether they'd miss you." "We'll miss you," Caleb said seriously. "A lot." "I know, and that's the only inheritance that matters, being missed, being loved, being someone whose presence actually mattered." Richard closed his eyes, tired, content. "Thank you," he whispered, "for teaching an old man how to be wealthy, finally." He died 2 weeks later, peacefully, surrounded by David and Caleb, holding their hands. At his funeral, David spoke. "Richard Hayes was a complicated man, brilliant, driven, successful by every worldly measure. But he spent 60 years chasing the wrong definition of wealth until my son returned his wallet one night in a hospital, until he saw us, two people with nothing, giving freely what we had. And he learned, at 62, that wealth isn't money. Wealth is being someone who would be missed." David looked at Caleb. "My son asked Mr. Hayes once, if you died, who would cry?" That question changed everything. Richard spent his last 3 years making sure the answer wasn't nobody. And now dozens of families are crying, grateful, because he built a legacy of character, of kindness, of care. The Character Foundation thrived, funded 247 families the first 3 years. The maternal wing saved 89 mothers and babies who would have died under old conditions. And Richard's nephews? They contested the will, lost, learned nothing, still bitter, still waiting for money that would never come. But Richard's true legacy, chosen family, transformed values, lives saved, that lived on, growing, multiplying, exactly as Maria would have wanted. On the wall of the foundation office, beneath Maria's picture, hung a new photo, Richard, smiling, genuinely happy, and beneath it, a quote, "I died rich before. Now I die loved. That's the only wealth that survives death. Richard Hayes." Caleb visited that office every week, studied the photos, remembered. The billionaire who tested kindness and learned he'd been failing the only test that mattered. The test of character, of presence, of being someone worth missing. He'd failed for 60 years, but he'd passed in the end. And that, Maria would have said, was enough. Because grace isn't about never falling, it's about getting back up, learning, choosing better, becoming someone who lives their wealth instead of just counting it. And Richard Hayes, in his final years, had finally learned to be wealthy. Not in dollars, in love, in presence, in mattering. That's the only wealth that survives death, the only inheritance worth leaving, the only thing we take with us when we go.
Sometimes the greatest wealth isn't what we earn, it's who would miss us when we're gone. And sometimes it takes a child returning a wallet to teach a billionaire what it means to be rich. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Becca's Stories.